Okay, if everybody can find their seats, we're going to get started here in a minute. Got a couple people coming in. We'll give them a couple more minutes. All right, well, good evening and welcome to the first in-person public meeting for the Greektown Placemaking Vision Plan. I'm Caroline Lamford. I'm a principal planner with the Planning and Zoning Department, and I'm joined with my colleagues, Pat McNeese, who's our planning supervisor, and Ali Keene, also a principal planner. We're being assisted in this study with consultants from Stantec. We have Lori Viola, Vasily Kostakis, Jared Beck, and Lee Gray here to help us. This project came about as a citizen-driven request directed by the commission. And what our desired result is a citizen-driven plan for implementation. First, we're going to talk about what the plan is and what we've heard so far, go over some of the goals and timeline. Then we're going to give some alternatives for preservation in the study area. We're going to do a little bit of live polling about that. And then we're going to talk about opportunities for placemaking and mobility improvements. We're going to do a little bit more live polling. Then we're going to have a break and have you work on those packets regarding the placemaking opportunities. And then after that break, we're going to move into public comment. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Lori.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you for participating tonight. The goal of our project is to develop collaborative plans with the residents and the business owners here to preserve the cultural heritage, working waterfront, and the historic character of the district while creating vibrant public spaces. So that's what we were assigned to, and some of the project outcomes that we might expect would be evaluation of existing plans and policies, identifying potential changes, recommendations for historic and cultural preservation, placemaking and public space improvement recommendations, recommendations for economic development. And some of the outcomes that we don't expect are recommendations for major infrastructure projects like seawalls and things like that, Greektown-specific architectural guidelines for immediate implementation, and just to remember that it's not just limited to Greektown National Register Historic District, the project. So we're moving along on our timeline, and we're going to be ready to submit our final draft and public report in the first of the year. And right now, we're in the public engagement stakeholder part of our project. And because of people's recommendations at the beginning of the project, we decided to hold off until now to do this community public engagement, as many of you did travel during the summer. So instead, to keep the ball rolling, what we did was we had some surveys put up on Connect Tarpon so that all of you could participate if you wanted to, and we do appreciate the participation that we got. We had 2 surveys, and we had a map exercise. I'm not going to go into great detail about them, but I think it's really important to us to look at some of the top answers. Our first survey question asked, what makes Greektown unique? And you can see that the answers were, some of the top answers: Greek business and cultural institutions, the working waterfront, historic buildings, and of course, sponges. And then what threatens the integrity of Greektown, which is a really important question. Top answers were lack of building and property maintenance, new buildings with incompatible architectural styles, and non-local businesses. Again, all of these answers and all of this information you can find again on Connect Tarpon. We then went into a second survey, and more than half of you actually said you would support guidelines for residential properties of Greektown outside of the existing historic guideline boundaries. That's architectural style guidelines. So more than half of you. And almost 70% of you said you would support the same type of architectural style guidelines for commercial properties of Greektown outside of the existing historic guidelines. So it's very interesting results from that survey. We also asked a little bit about city incentives. What could the city do to help provide and enhance building and property maintenance in the Greektown area? And some of your top answers were grants and funding assistance, tax incentives. As far as what the city's actions could do to protect and preserve Greektown, top answers were create and expand historic district guidelines, and more stringent code enforcement and fines. The next question talked about what could property owners do to protect and preserve Greektown. Some of the top answers were maintain their property and abide by the codes and guidelines. So this was a very interesting, informative set of answers that we got from you at the beginning, and now we're into the in-person stage, and I'm going to turn it over to Jared. He's going to talk a little bit about studies that the city has taken on as well that go hand in hand with our project. Jared?
Thanks. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to recognize that in addition to this process, the city is also working on other initiatives to better prepare the city as well as the Greektown area for some of the changes, particularly climate related, that are coming and we're experiencing. So what we do want to just acknowledge is that the city is at the near final stages of completing a vulnerability assessment as well as completing an adaptation and resiliency plan. The vulnerability assessment that the city is doing is citywide, and that's the first step, and they're prioritizing the adaptation resiliency plan for the historic district and Greektown. So those, while they're not a part of this, they are separate studies that the city's doing that will feed into whatever the longer term implementation program is. It'll help them guide in a number of different things that they do working in their programs in the upcoming years. I'm going to click this the right way one of these times. One of the things I do want to acknowledge, and we've talked a lot about the importance, and we understand the importance of preserving the character. A part of that character are the buildings. And so we have to be realistic and acknowledge some of the challenges, which is why the city's doing the vulnerability assessment as well as the adaptation plan. And that is that the majority of much of the city is actually within a floodplain. And so as we look towards future development or redevelopment of parcels, we just need to be mindful that within the Greektown area, the majority of, wrong way again, There you go. The majority of most new development is not going to be able to be built at grade the way that it is. And so the goal here is to understand and identify ways in which we can still allow that development to occur, but do it in a way that is compatible with the existing fabric of the Greektown area. So what we're going to talk about are just a couple of different things that the city's already got in place in certain portions of the community, as well as what could be expanded or altered or increased in ways to help better benefit the Greektown area. These are three things we're going to ask you on when we get into the live polling. One is related to establishing a new local historic district or the existing historic district and the creation of an additional one. It's going to be looking at an expansion of the existing special area plan in the SMART code, as well as the opportunity and consideration for creating a conservation overlay district. So there's a lot that's occurring within the city, and I'm going to go through this and try to do it in a very orderly way. Currently within the city, there is a National Register Historic District for the downtown area. That is the red boundary that you see on the screen. There is a local historic district, including that larger downtown area. The reason that's important is that the National Register District comes with no required guidelines or restrictions. The local historic district comes with general restrictions and a approval process required for changes or modifications or new development within that green boundary. Then there is also the National Register Greektown Historic District boundary, which you can see in the teal. So there's some overlap occurring between the downtown district, the Greektown district, as well as the local district. The teal parcel colors that you see are the contributing properties, meaning historic structures within the Greektown area. And you can then see where there's sort of the concentration and overlap of all of these. Where that ties into this slide then is as it relates to the Greektown area and the existing National Register Historic District boundary, there's just a small portion of it that falls within the local historic district guidelines, which is what adds the substance and requires the review through the Heritage Preservation Board. Now, we've also added in here a boundary for the overall study area of where we're working. I know a few of you have questioned that, why we did that instead of just focusing on the core Greektown area, and it's very simple. It's that, as you'll see in the next couple slides, there are special planning studies or overlays or regulations to the east, which is basically along 19. There are also regulations, being the local historic district, the national districts to the south. It is just good planning practice to look at the broader area and the natural boundary here, and recognizing that what happens in one area is potentially going to impact another area. Does not mean that anything that comes out of this study or the final results will apply to all of this. We recognize the focus is here, but we are being mindful of the overall area for the longer term process in working with the city. So the city has, within its local historic district, so remember that's the green boundary, the city has created district guidelines. They are not code regulations, they are the recommended items that are required to be reviewed through the preservation process. Things like that for modifications to properties and new construction would be creating an addition to a building, adding new driveways, demolition of a building, any parking lot, for example, new signs, awnings, or any major change to the structure. Currently, this does not have any impact on paint color, but it is, again, the structural components of the buildings. The design guidelines that the city has in place, they are recommendations, and they are recommendations based off of the Secretary of the Interior standards, but they are not code. This is what then gets reviewed as these properties within that green area, and there is that overlap within the Greektown area. As applications come forward to the city within that area, they would go through this process to the Heritage Preservation Board. And then there are also guidelines regulated or guidelines directed towards new construction. And those guidelines, again, they are recommendations. They're not necessarily required, but they do encourage the compatibility of massing and proportion of size. They look at setbacks and spacing in relation to additional properties or additional development, as well as the overall building and orientation, entrances, windows, features like that. So this would be an example of what the guidelines would recommend. So the top illustration would be suggested of what we would normally like by guidelines. The bottom is what is inappropriate based on the guidelines within that historic district. And then in addition to the historic district, again, being the green, so everything we just looked at in those last couple slides, that applies to this boundary here. In addition to that, the city has their special area plan in the transit code. So this is another mechanism that the city's already put in place to try to have some impact or control over major modifications to existing buildings or any new development, redevelopment within the area. What this does, and through the SMART code, there are regulations or a regulatory framework within, whoops, oh, Allie, I just made a mistake. Let's see. Perfect. So what this code actually allows then, within the area that you can see, there is, through the code, a regulatory framework now that does restrict, or I should say, articulate the form of buildings. So it would be the height, the overall structure, shape, it could be setbacks, certain placements for your primary entry locations into the building. It also can look at window locations and general things like that. So there's a framework in place right now for US 19, as well as the northern part of the Greektown area. And then there are also accompanying that are character districts. So the city has incorporated a number of these within the overall overlay area that generally recommends and encourages certain types of uses or other elements that add to the overall character within the Greektown area. Besides the historic district then, and the guidelines or recommendations that they have within that, city is also considering potentially creating a conservation overlay district. So there's a couple different things, and where I would go with this is the transect and the code that we were just looking at earlier. This is something that is generally restrictive in its overall form. Again, its shape, the way that things look. It is not as restrictive as detailed design guidelines. If the guidelines that are included within the historic district were ever expanded beyond this, they could, through this form, generally start to mirror some of those similar requirements. The conservation and placemaking, creating a conservation overlay district, this could then go into a greater level of potential or more specific elements related to Greektown within the various areas. It could be where we have the existing transect and SMART code, as well as further beyond, just becomes another mechanism to further regulate what could happen with any of the future new development or modifications to existing buildings. So with that, do we want to move into our first questions? All right.
Okay, so we're going to, did you have a question?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
I'm curious if I understood correctly. Earlier, I thought I heard that new construction would be 1 foot above sea level, water level, whatever. It is my understanding that FEMA requires 11 feet above for new construction. Could you explain that to me, please?
Sure, and just if anyone didn't hear, the question was in regards to FEMA requirements for new construction to build. So basically the FEMA requirement is that you have to build 1 foot above your base flood elevation. The base flood elevation isn't necessarily the same number for every property. I think generally in Greektown, that base flood elevation is what, 10 feet? Between like 8 and 10 feet, so that's where the 11 feet, if you have a 10-foot base flood elevation, the lowest level of your habitable floor has to be at least 11 feet above, 11 feet up. So that's the distinction. So it can vary, but generally I would say it's between 8 to 10 feet base flood elevation. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, so I guess if you decide you want to build something, a new building, whether it's commercial or residential, you're going to have to deal with this height requirement, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, so that's a consideration. So we just wanted to make everyone aware that that's something that the city has no control over is, if you're in a floodplain, you have to build to FEMA requirements. And then just so I can point out, anytime we have questions, we're happy to answer them, but we do need to have people go up to the microphone. I should have mentioned that to you. We are recording, so people that aren't able to attend here tonight in person can watch online, and it only picks up what you hear on the microphone. So if we can just have people ask questions at the microphone. All right. Perfect. Okay, so we're going to move into our first exercise for... I'm sorry. Yes, we can take one more question, and then again, we'll have more public comment at the end, but Tina, come on up.
Thank you. So I have, and you did explain about this extra area. I do want to point out that when the Greektown Historic District was created, it was based on very strict codes that the National Register had in terms of what would constitute a historic district that was based on, that also had a traditional culture overlay to it, and it had a certain, and all the contributing resources had to be tied to some kind of traditional culture, and that's why things like the marina were not included in the district. So this is based on a certain pattern, residential pattern and history and so on and so forth. This area that you've included does not comply with any of those. So my question is, okay, and when the money was put aside for this project, it was for a Greektown district, but this is not historically part of Greektown. So I don't understand why that is justified.
I think what I would do, Tina, is recognize that that's the boundary that's been selected, and we recognize that it goes beyond the Greektown National Historic District. This study, while that is the priority, it happens to be included, and we should be mindful of what may potentially happen beyond and surrounding the existing Greektown National Historic District. It doesn't mean that what comes out of this will apply to that. It doesn't mean that that's going to influence what comes specifically into the Greektown area, but we are looking at the general area holistically for that, acknowledging, though, that the Greektown National District is the core element, and that boundary was created based on the percentage of its historic structures and the neighborhood and all of those other things. So I don't want you to think that this is trying to diminish the Greektown National District at all. It's just recognizing from a study area that what happens in one area can impact another area. So we just want to look at it holistically.
Impact in terms of flooding and things like, is that what you're looking at?
Well, it could be inappropriate development, right? I mean, it could be potentially some of the, while we're not making infrastructure recommendations, there could be some type of guidelines that might be helpful for other portions, considering that everything on the east and the south of that overall area have some type of control in. So it's just more of that longer term holistic view, recognizing that there is that real focus on the Greektown area.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're going to move into our first exercise, which is some live polling. I know some of you that may have attended some public meetings that we've had in the past have done this before, but I'm just going to help you all get logged in. If anyone has any issues or doesn't have a cell phone or laptop or anything with them, we do have some paper copies available that we can get to you. So what you're going to do is on your phone.
Before we keep going, I'm a little concerned here because we're polling already after that, 5-minute
No.
presentation? Everyone here is pretty much clueless, I think, about what's happening right now. And then with Ms. Bucavalis's concerns that were just addressed and Renee not being here, I don't want any of these results considered for anything because no one has been identified as anyone as a property owner, business owner, anything in this district. And now we have some concern over what the district lines are.
One of the
And we're gonna
questions
jump
talks
into
about the
polling
district
and voting.
lines.
We're going to start voting right now.
Okay, so this is one mechanism for public engagement. We have to have multitudes of opportunities for
gonna
people
be
to
a lot
talk.
more
So we
than
have
this, and
online
Renee needs to be
surveys.
present
We
for
also
these
have
meetings.
available in your packets, there's blank comment sheets, so you can put general comments in. At the end of the presentation and the live polling questions, we're also going to open up the mic to just public comment. Everything's being recorded, so we'll have all the comments, all the information. We'll take questions at that time. So I understand that this is a lot of information. There's a lot of overlapping pieces in this area. So it's a lot to digest and take in, so we understand that. But this is one avenue for us to ask some direct questions and get some feedback. So with that, if everyone can open their phones and go open their internet browser, and what you're gonna do is in your URL bar, so it's basically the search bar at the bottom, you're gonna type in the poll EV, everything that's shown in blue, .com/KIMY353. And we have people walking around to help you get logged in if you have any trouble with that. And then once you get in there, it's gonna either ask you to join the presentation, or you'll see kind of a black screen, which I know you can't see this, that says waiting for the presentation to start. Once we have a question go live, it'll pop up on your screen and allow you to choose the answers. So we'll let everyone take a couple minutes to get logged in. If you have any issues, just raise your hand. If you need any paper surveys, raise your hand and we get a copy of that to you as well.
Just have a black screen that has
Yes,
words waiting for Kimmy 353.
exactly. That's exactly what you should see. All right. Anyone need any assistance or help?
If you could just raise your hand if you need any assistance.
Just give everyone a couple minutes to get logged in here, and then we'll go through. We just have a couple questions.
If you're going to speak, if you could please come up to the microphone and
Sorry, we
state
just
your
need to
name
capture it.
and address, please.
My name is John Terrapini. I live at 22 North Spring Boulevard. I live in a historic home. I own multiple properties in the historic district. We don't even know what where the actual area is defined, and you want us to answer questions. I'm happy to have design guidelines. I live with design guidelines, but I agree with Ms. Franzese. We're not far enough along in the process to answer these questions.
So part of these are general questions. This is just one mechanism, like I said, for us to get some feedback. There's multitudes of opportunities and ways for us to take comments. This is not final decision-making with these polls. This is just something to take into consideration as we go through this study. And one of the questions that you'll see talks about if there are guidelines, does it apply to this greater study area boundary, or is it to be the smaller Greektown boundary that's established in the National Register? So there are some questions to help us understand where you think it's appropriate to apply. And again, we have the blank comment sheets in the packets that you can put any additional information in. So we understand that there's a lot coming at you guys, but we need to ask some questions to help give some more direction as we move forward in the process. Okay, so is everyone ready to move on to the questions? Okay, so like I said, if your phone screen is live. Oh, Pat, we have one question over here.
It never showed join the presentation.
Do you see a black screen that says waiting for the presentation? Then that's all you need to see. Perfect. Okay, so what I'm gonna do, we have a test question here just to make sure everyone knows how to use the program. I'm going to ask the question, and then I'll switch to the next slide and it will go live. When a question goes live, it will pop up on your screen and you can select your answer. And it may take a couple seconds for it to load. There sometimes is a little bit of a lag. So we'll work our way through this, everybody. Okay, so the first practice question, just to make sure we're working okay, is what is the best Halloween treat? Is it A, Snickers, B, Twix, C, candy apple, or a D, Tarpon Springs Greek salad? So with that, the question is now live, and you should be able to select your answers. All right. All right. Snickers are popular. Close second, the Greek salad. I agree. Okay, and I'll give everyone enough time to answer the questions before moving on to the next one. Okay, so we're gonna get into the first real question here.
Can I ask a question? So all you have to do is highlight your answers. If it highlights in the color, then your answer is
Yes, exactly. And it will stay on that screen until the next question goes live. Okay? All right, we're going to move on to the next question. Let's see. All right, our first question is, do you support enhanced design controls, which are rules and regulations within Greektown? A, yes, B, no. And the question is now live. And while everyone's inputting their answers, I'll just mention that we are going to keep this live poll for anyone that might be watching at home. We're going to keep it live up until Wednesday of next week, which is the 25th, until the end of day, so 5 o'clock. So if they're not here today, people can still put in their answers. And we do recommend anyone that may be watching at home to wait until after the meeting, because there is sometimes a delay for the questions. All right, has everyone had an opportunity to put their answers in? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Question 2, if enhanced design guidelines are put in place, what method is your first preference? A, designating Greektown as a local historic district. B, expansion of the special area plan and smart code. C, establishing a neighborhood conservation overlay district. Or D, I prefer no enhanced design controls.
Based off the 30 minutes that we got to talk about all these districts.
The question is now live. All right, still see a little bit of movement here. Okay, has everyone had an opportunity to put their answer in? Still jumping. Okay.
Watching this could be voting for this right now, because I mean, there's no sign in to make sure that you're a resident or anything, so anybody watching on the, right?
Anyone that's watching on the Tarpon Springs YouTube channel, yes, that's correct.
And is open until how long?
The poll will be live until, for 1 week, Wednesday, October 25th until 5 p.m. Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the next question.
You don't have to prove you're a resident even.
Okay, so like I said, we had to have all comments on the microphone, but I understand some of the skepticism about this, but this is, again, we're taking into consideration. We have to move on to the next question because we want to have time for public comment at the end, and I know a lot of people want to get up and speak at the mic. Okay, so question 3, if enhanced design guidelines, this is the same question, are put in place, what is your second preference for preservation? A, designating a local historic district, expansion of the special area code and smart code. C, establishing the neighborhood conservation overlay district. Or D, I prefer no enhanced design controls. That question is now live. All right, everyone have a chance to put their questions in or answers in? Great. All right. Question 4, if enhanced design guidelines are put in place, where should they apply? A, the entire Greektown placemaking study area, which is the boundary in yellow. B, only the Greektown National Register boundary, which is the teal line. Or C, I prefer no enhanced design controls. And that question is now live. All right. Okay, everyone got their answers in? Okay, this is the last question in this section. Question 5, if enhanced design guidelines are put in place for Greektown, what should they apply to? A, all development. B, only new development, which would include commercial and residential. C, only commercial properties. D, only residential properties. And E, I prefer no enhanced design controls. And that question is now live. I'm sorry, you hit B? You should be able to switch your answer. See if you can select the, okay. All right, great. All right, if you can all just leave your screens up, we have 2 more questions after the next segment of the presentation.
Okay, now we're on to placemaking and the packet explanation. So did everybody receive a packet when they came in, 11 by 17, a couple pages to write on? And everybody has a pen or pencil to write on them. We're not going to do them exactly right now, but what we're going to do is explain a little bit about them. We've had people say that they didn't feel they had a good enough explanation on the polling, so we're going to try to get into a little bit of explanation on some of the placemaking. I think the important thing, firstly, is to understand what placemaking is. So we all look at it as a process of creating quality places that people want to live, work, play, and learn in. It's an approach to planning, design, building, and maintaining public spaces that focus on the people that use them and benefit that space. So that's what this placemaking, it's a little bit different than guidelines right now. We're kind of trying to be creative now. So our first preservation and placemaking page, if you guys all have those open, what would you like to see? So in some of these areas, you can see there's asterisks in different areas along the Greektown area. And there's some options that are given with some pictures on the side that kind of give us an idea of what we're talking about. So we're talking about a public space, a public vibrant space. And we're talking about site furnishings such as benches or trash cans, bike racks, those kinds of things. Pavement enhancement, that middle slide there kind of shows some different kinds of pavement enhancement that kind of take and lead a person, you know, that's walking on the sidewalk maybe to an area where there's a bench or an area where there's shade. Landscaping, additional landscaping, comfort and shade, aesthetic security and lighting, artistic enhancement. You guys have a lot of artistic elements downtown. You know, do we want to add some more in some of these places, anywhere on the map? Formalized parking versus areas on some of the right-of-ways where there's just sort of parking, where there's no actual striping for the parking. Or if you have something completely different, please fill that in as well. So you guys can work on these while I'm going through them, or you can wait and we'll take a little bit of a break after I go through each one, but I'm just gonna move this along to the next one. The next one is talking a little bit about mobility improvement opportunities. And we're looking again at the study area that we have been working with throughout the project. And we're talking about areas where you feel maybe you've seen maybe unsafe crosswalks, where we need to add some crosswalks, or where crosswalks need to be improved upon, adding some sidewalks in, where areas where you think street closures might be appropriate, more vehicle control, perhaps alley improvement, and then again, anything that you might want to add yourself. So you can go ahead and mark that up with the number corresponding to what you see as an opportunity or maybe as a constraint for mobility. And I'm going to go on to the next one. And this is for what would you like to see in areas where the city may acquire these different sites. So we could add parking, we could add a park, recreation, public gathering spaces, a Greek amphitheater, maybe a special events space, or something other. Again, these are public spaces. So you can use that number, even if you have one or more ideas to add to the different areas. And then again, we're going to get back to the polling questions. Do we want to do those, Ally, now? And then we'll take a break after the remainder of the polling questions. Yeah. And then we can take a break and we can walk around and help you guys with the package if you have any questions on them before we do the public comment.
Okay, so we just have 2 more questions. So if you open up your phones again, it should leave you off with the last question that we asked. And I just want to emphasize again that this is just one avenue for public engagement. There's multiple opportunities. We still have more public engagement as we move through the process and the project. This is really just for us to gauge the overall temperament for different outcomes that could be results of this, this study. So I just wanted to emphasize that this isn't a final decision right now. Okay, so the next question is, what is your first priority for the outcome of this project? A, new or enhanced public spaces. B, implement a preservation method, which are the three we talked about, a local historic district, expansion of the special area plan, or neighborhood conservation overlay. C, maintenance or beautification programs and incentives. D, economic development programs. E, transportation improvements, or F, leave it alone. And that question is now live. Everyone got their answers in? Okay. All right. Next question. It's the same question, but what is your second priority with the same answers? And that question is now live. All right, excellent. Oh, still going. Okay, so that concludes the live polling session of the presentation, so you don't need to pull out your phones again. But now we'll take about a 15-minute break so that you can take some time to fill out your packets. You don't need to have your packets completed this evening. I know there's a lot of information. You may want to think about it. You can drop those back off at City Hall. Again, we'll accept those until Wednesday next week by the end of the day. If you have any questions, we're all here to help you guys as well. So we will convene back at 7 o'clock and we'll do some public comment.
we would appreciate it so we can give you as much time as possible for the public comments. So we have about an hour left of the meeting tonight for public comments, and we want you to know that there's a blank comment sheet in the packet for those of you who would prefer to actually write down your thoughts and pass those in. For those of you who would like to get up and speak, we just ask that you respect everyone else's time limit and that you try to limit your comments to the subject matter of the study, which would include a potential local historic district designation for Greektown, potential expansion of the SMART code or special area plan, potential neighborhood conservation overlay district. Those were the three things we talked about. And then placemaking opportunities and elements. That was the packet that we just went through. Or transportation improvement opportunities. And then lastly, the mechanism for implementing these recommendations. So if you would please feel free to come up to the podium and state your name, and we're gonna try to keep the comments to 2 minutes. Is that reasonable?
It's kind of short, 2 minutes.
Well, go ahead and we'll see where we end up.
I'll be as brief as I can, but I think there's some important things to talk about. My name is Cindy Terrapini. I live at 22 North Spring Boulevard. Just to give you some background for the folks that y'all might not know, I do have extensive preservation experience. I created the first historic district in Tampa, redid the Ybor City Historic District, was executive director of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation, the only statewide historic preservation advocacy group. I served on the National Register Review Board, appointed by the Secretary of State. I served on the Tampa Hillsborough Preservation Board, again, appointed by the Secretary of State. Locally, I served 2 terms on the city's preservation board, including chairman. Was involved in the expansion of the fruit salad area, which was done in 2009 or so, 2008. And I have been an expert witness on historic preservation in other communities. I just say that to say that I do know and understand preservation generally, and certainly understand it in Tarpon. Also, I think we need to refresh everyone's memory. The first historic preservation ordinance in Tarpon was adopted in 1990, and the first and only district under that ordinance that has design review is the area that we've been talking about. It's the downtown core, the Golden Crescent, and the neighborhood around the downtown. In 2009, as I mentioned, historic resources study was done by Janus, and there was a discussion about expanding the historic district either north or south. Actually, there was a vote taken, and there was no interest to the north, which is now the kind of the Greektown area that we're talking about. So the expansion moved to the south to expand the fruit salad area. And then the Greektown Historic District was done in 2014 as a traditional cultural property. The problem I have with what's being discussed tonight is that a large portion of the Greektown Historic District overlaps the current National Register District. There's 7 blocks and about 5 to 6 half blocks. It's the area that starts at Park and goes all the way south down to Tarpon Avenue. I think that's inappropriate to have an overlap, and frankly, I've never seen an overlap of 2 National Register districts ever in 40 years. So as a property owner in that overlap area, I would like to be, I do not want any changes made to that. I think all the property owners that are in the historic district now and the design review, they understand what it is. Everybody understands the preservation board. They understand what the regulations are, and there's no need to add it to a Greektown area. And as far as Greektown, I think that really needs to be a decision by the Greektown property owners. And by that, I mean from Park Avenue to the north. They can, as a group, if there's widespread support for some kind of design review, then the city should consider it. But that, I'm not gonna opine on that because I don't own property in the Greektown area, and I think that's really best left to those property owners. Thank you.
Thank you.
And here's the map of the blue area. I guess y'all know this, but it really needs to be that.
Can the next person stand up and introduce himself that would like to speak?
My name is Ted Franzese. I live at 1005 Rose Tree Lane, Tarpon Springs. I spent 10 years on planning and zoning, the last 4 as chairman. And I have spent 21 and a half years on city committees. I'm a native. and I believe in Tarpon Springs and looking out for its citizens. One thing I want to say is the invalidity of this vote. We don't know who's voting. If you want to vote, you need to be a property owner down at Sponge Docks. Just like we would like to follow the rules to vote as we do for national and local and state elections. And the other thing is, where did this come from? The people at the Sponge Docks did not ask for this. I'm a property owner. I've been paying taxes for over 50 years. My mother has, and I've taken it over, and I've been paying taxes for years. I should have the right to vote. I should have the information to know about this. This presentation was totally confusing. You think most people here would understand? And I'm not trying to insult anybody. Planning and zoning is difficult. But the way this was drawn up, overlapping lines, crisscrossing, no, it has to be clear. I've been a professor. I have trained dental specialists. I have trained doctors. This thing tonight is a fiasco, and whoever made it needs to leave town. So we at the Sponge Docks do not want you or whoever started this mess to tell us what to do with our property. We pay taxes. You want an answer? I'll bring you my tax bill. And I'll let you pay for it. I pay taxes like everybody else here who has a property down at the docks. You don't tell us what to do. You're not going to take our freedom of choice here with all this baloney. If I were the chairman, again, right here tonight, let's say, I would never allow this junk that you guys have been presenting. You're intruding onto our freedom. Just get off of our backs, leave us alone, and I don't want to hear any more of these. My answers to all those questions was to leave us alone. We are free people. We do not need you to tell us what to do with our property. People historically have killed over property, and you guys know that. Okay. What do you think is going on?
Thank you very much for your comment.
Hang on.
We don't need
what
to
do you think is
speak
going
like that,
on?
I don't
Just
think.
stop a minute. What do you think is going on in the Middle East right now? You're going to come in and tell us what to do with our property? You're nuts. You're going to have a fight on your hands. And you're going to be sorry you put this presentation on tonight. I can tell you that.
Thank you
You
for
ought
your
to just
comments.
leave town. I
Your
don't care
time
who
is
you
up.
are.
Sir, your
I
time
don't
is
care
up.
who you are either. Let me talk. Now I'm going to talk. I don't care what you say. So this is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to planning and zoning. I can tell you that. It's a crappy job.
Thank you. Does anybody else would like to come up and speak and express themselves? You can get in line. Excuse me, you can get in line behind her.
Hi, my name is Janet Ash. I live at 49 Central Court. I wanted to understand more about what you're doing. My concern is I moved in a residential neighborhood that I thought was established, and we have now had 3 historic homes torn down and had half of our lives in what we thought was a beautiful neighborhood just disturbed because the property owners could take something and put $1.5 million McMansions in a nice area and tear down all the live oak trees and take away buildings that were built in the 1900s. And so I'm interested in what's going on because there's a poll. I understand homeowners should have rights, but I have rights as a homeowner, And I have lost for 5 of my 10 years peace and quiet in a neighborhood that I thought was established to people building McMansions because they can't afford Clearwater Beach. And I think Tarpon is better than that. So if this helps people just coming willy-nilly and tearing anything down that are nice homes just because they don't have the high ceilings or they don't have this or that, I'm willing to understand what you're trying to do. That's my point of view.
Thank you. Name is Laura Lee Slocum. I live at 69 West Park. I am in the local historic district, and I have to say, when I seen the outline, that was one of my concerns. I was wondering how a neighborhood conservation was going to mesh with the already in place historic district guidelines. I understand, if I understand correctly, I think there's a lot of people here that would really like a detailed explanation of what are the regulations and codes on the book that do protect the historic nature of the sponge docks. I've heard that there is none, I've heard there is some, so I'm not sure. It seems like, as I'm speaking to people in the neighborhood, that the primary focus is they want the sponge docks to remain historic. They want that culture to not, go away. And, even those of us that are not Greek, that's why we came here. We love that heritage, and we do want to see it first and foremost protected, as evidence in your survey. That was one of the highest responses. So that was my concern. I'm not in agreement with the outline area. I think that it leaves too much confusion open. And I definitely, after the Board of Commissioners meeting last night, I think the city needs to seriously consider not creating a big hornet's nest. There's already so much contention in the city, we don't need more. So I guess tread carefully on these plans and really get input from people. And one of my questions is, it was stated early when the meeting opened that this plan was not just pertaining to Greek culture, and I don't understand that, because the sponge docks is Greek culture. That's what everyone wants it to remain, so I don't understand that statement at all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
So I'd like to clarify just a couple of things. So the local historic district that we have, that is the only area in the city where there's regulations on what you can do to the property. The sponge docks are in a national historic district. They are contributing to that national historic district, but there are no regulations to what can be done in the Greektown National Register Historic District in that area that is outside of the local historic district. And I understand we've got a lot of overlapping planning districts here, so it can get a little bit confusing. But I just did want to clarify that.
Yeah, and we were just talking, and what we thought we could potentially do is maybe add kind of a facts and questions section on the Connect Tarpon Springs page, maybe just outlining some of those confusing questions as well. So we can do that over the next couple of days.
Good evening, Anita Protas, 901 Bayshore Drive. I just want to bring before the audience and all of you, after last night's meeting on historic property, we need to tread very lightly. It was wild last night. And we were able to preserve a piece of historic property. Walking down in the sponge docks and in the Greek neighborhoods today, a lot of the residents and property owners do not understand what is happening here tonight. A lot of them are not fluent in English. They couldn't get a hold of their children to come for them. We need to do something so they all understand thoroughly what's happening here. They're concerned about taxes. They're concerned about if they want to paint their door Greek blue, they won't be able to do it. They're very concerned about the homes down there and their property, and they do have property rights. And that's what was established here last night, property rights of the owners where they live and their businesses. So we need to be very careful of that.
If you could please come up to the mic if you're going to make a comment.
Okay.
Thank you.
My name is Michael Hollis. I live at 1504 Riverside Drive. But I do own property in Greektown, no matter how you draw it. Some on Dodecanese and some on Athens Street. I developed property on Dodecanese and even up in Orange Street, the Villa Pomosa. So I've built some of these things that are historical. And I've knocked down some things that might have been historical. But the point is, this additional regulation is like an eminent domain. You're taking the right of somebody to use their property differently than if they weren't in these districts. And the only thing that it seems not plausible is to use telephones and have people call up on telephones and give polls. You can easily find out who the property owners are inside this district. The city gets paid the county taxes, so you'll know for a fact who they are. And if 60 or 70% of them say, we like this regulation you came up with, maybe like this young lady here that didn't like knocking down houses because they built $1 million houses. I don't know where this is, but who knocked which house down to put $1 million. But if 50, 60, 70% feel that way and they approve your idea and they vote that way, I'll live with it. But non-telephones and people pushing buttons and we don't know who's voting and the ones that do own the property are not here. And yes, they should be, and you know who they are, because they pay the taxes. There is a tax roll, and y'all know who they are. And so I beseech you that all these pollings and ideas, and if she owns property in this district, she votes. And if 60%, the young lady who started said 70% of the commercials that we talked to down there agreed. Well, if they do, that's fine. But if it turns out only 10 or 15% do, just because you got some telephone calls saying otherwise, then we're taking somebody's property without due process. And that's my opinion. And like I said, all of this is going to come to fruition after I'm gone. I'm pretty old, and probably most of these buildings are going to get knocked down in about 25 or 30 years because a lot of them are ready to fall down. And I won't even be here. Thank you.
So thank you, and I would like to clarify that this, nobody is claiming that this straw man poll that we're doing here is any kind of binding vote. It's just to gather some input.
Why do it then? And then you're leading me to suspect that you're going to get some other group that's going to make enough noise and threaten the commissioners with not voting for them for re-election and go out and make it a big misinformation.
Thank you.
Jean Theophil-Dinoff. I live at 525 West Spruce Street. I'm on the Heritage Preservation Board, so I really do understand what's going on here, and I don't think anybody's saying to the Dodecanese people, the Greektown sponge docks, they're gonna tear things down. They just wanna fix them. You know, just make sure that when they fix them, they're still looking like they're from the old Greektown. I live in an area that I always thought should be part of the historic area on Spruce Street. So I'm really glad to see this, because the people across the street from me did all kinds of work on their house and never even got a building permit. And there's another street, I can't think of the name of it, Grand. There's a little box house that somebody just put in. So I'd like to see all that get regulated a little bit. And I'd like to get plaque on my house because it's over 100 years old. But I think we could do things like that and make it fun. But that's it. I just think that nobody's talking about tearing down Greektown. We're talking about making it better, look, you know, clean and pretty and nice. That's it for me.
Thank you.
Hi, Eleni Christopoulos. I own property at 698 and 694 Dodecanese Boulevard, as well as 533. I don't remember what the number is. So I am a property owner, and my family has had businesses there for 100 years coming up next year. So, you know, and the very central part of the Sponge Docks. So we should all speak for our own selves. I do support having some sort of regulations to preserve what we have so that over time this does not disappear, which would benefit all of us economically and otherwise. I think the fear may be when we're talking about the historic district that's downtown that has very stringent regulations, it makes people very uneasy and, you know, maybe fearful of we'll have these very, very, you know, tight regulations. And I think maybe it's important to talk about that there are other ways of doing regulations that are on the lighter side that might help us preserve what we have and not really, you know, be telling, nobody's gonna try to tell anybody what they can use their property for or what, you know, exactly, you know, not those stringent type of regulations that I think people are fearful of. So I think a good conversation so that people really understand what's trying to happen here is beneficial so that to ease some of those anxieties that are, you know, warranted when we're, you know, we think of, you know, we have to, you know, replace a shingle and we have to call somebody. So, but I do thoroughly support having some guidelines so that, you know, new development coming in doesn't create a mishmash down there, that we lose the character of what we love so much. We say we want it left alone, but that means if we leave it alone, if we get left alone, that it won't be left alone, but that it will be destroyed by people coming in and doing all kinds of things that don't match or don't feel right for down there. So I think we have to kind of maybe clarify what we're, you know, what our intention is. And our intention is, what I understand, is for us to help keep the cultural district and keep it feeling like it is so that it does move forward. And one of the other small pieces I wanted to mention was somewhere in the presentation, we talked about, you know, adding some art down there. I'm also on the Public Arts Committee. And I've actually kind of asked them to stop putting anything else down there for now until we do this. Because part of the beauty down there gets cluttered when we add too many things. So the dock itself, the main dock, there's too much going on down there, and we lose sort of that, you know, the space for the working waterfront, plus just the beautiful view of the boats. So I think it's, you know, maybe bringing a little bit back to its more natural, you know, look, and stop thinking we have to decorate so much. It's got so much beauty and character of its own that we don't need to overly do things. I guess my time might be up. I heard a beep. But you know, I think there are different opinions of property owners, and I do agree with the fact that property owners should probably weigh in more than just any resident in the city. So that I do agree with, and I don't know how that could be accomplished. That's y'all to figure out.
Thank you so much.
Catch my breath. Hi, I'm Frances Beliers Descarolas. That was my niece that just spoke, so I'm going to ditto a lot of what she said. But a lot of times I like just to go look within myself. I visited 12 countries. I lived in Greece for 7 years and went back almost every summer. The one thing that we cherished, my husband and I, my 2 daughters, in our travels, was not going in to see the modernization of each country, but to search out the smaller towns, the places that kind of stayed the way they were. Those are the things that made us feel when we were in Italy, or when we were in Switzerland, we were in Switzerland. And I said it very simply to my niece earlier on this evening, that
all the years that I lived in Greece, I had so many people come through and visit me for me to show them around. And many times I'd hear comments like, well, you know, in America it's like this or like that. And I'd have to say, with all due respect, if you're coming to Greece to find America, then you should have saved your time and money and stayed in America. Come to Greece. Don't spend the time to see the beautiful new buildings, but go to the ancient ruins. Go to the small villages up in the mountains and see how the local people lived and make that your experience, because there's so much to learn and take away. I too am a property owner. I too am part of the Balearis family. My father in 1924 established St. Nicholas Boat Line. So the Sponge Docks is important to us. It's a way that he took care of his 8 children so that they could be educated and then educate their children and on down the line. But I feel that, and I do a lot of the Facebooking for the company, and most of the remarks I get is how much they enjoyed and they felt like they were on an island in Greece. So if we modernize it, if we take that flavor away, then what are they coming for? So the Sponge Docks isn't just a place to enjoy the culture, but it also, as many people here brought up, taxes. Well, that gives the taxes to the city and the county and the state. So we are contributors to our town and our county and our state. If that all dies down, this would be a big loss in many ways. And that's I just wanted to point out. People come to see, feel, and experience something different. And that's why the city many times advertises, if you can't go to Greece, come to Tarpon. Maybe not in those words, but in essence.
If I could ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
I'm sorry?
If I could ask you to wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, I am.
Thank you so much.
Just made my point, and good luck to everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Tina Bukavalis, Athens Street. I think listening to the comments, I think it's probably pretty clear that most of the people, or a lot of people in the Greektown district, would probably prefer something like a neighborhood conservation overlay, which is a little less stringent than the downtown district regulations, but could be tailored to our needs so that and that this is actually a very important thing, because as we've heard and as we already know, we have fought a 5-story hotel coming in at the docks when there are no 5-story buildings. We're constantly seeing buildings built that do not align with the current architecture and character of the neighborhood. And if it keeps up, we're just going to lose that character. So I think this is probably the most important part of what we're looking at, and I would urge, if at all possible, that you consider drafting some guidelines as part of this. Maybe not the final product, but after you've heard everything, I think you should have a good idea what people might be interested in. The other thing I want to just briefly mention, and I do want to say, I now kind of agree with you about that area, because after we were talking about some of these guidelines, it occurred to me, and I drove around it this morning, again, that is absolutely ripe for big-time development. And if we don't include that, it could have a big effect on traffic patterns and a lot of things in the Greektown Historic District. So I see the point of that. But the other thing I think is important is to talk about the kinds of things we might like at the Sponge Docks, and I think Biba did somewhat. What it is is good enough in itself, but maybe what it needs is to be brought back to a more historic look, or its earlier self a little bit. And that is easily done, I think, by bringing it back to the wood and brick, some consistency in awnings. It's a similar thing as they did on Hibiscus Street not that long ago. In addition, I think everyone wants some locally based events that are appropriate culturally to the district for people to get out there and make it a more lively place. They've managed to do that in the downtown district. That needs to be done also, I think, in the Greektown district at the docks in order for more people to come and enjoy it, because it just packs up, basically at 5 o'clock every night. And the kind of events that are down there now are sort of prepackaged outside, not locally based. So I think we need something that would be, that people here want to come to, but I think that's also what cultural tourists, which is what we have, are more interested in seeing. So thank you.
Thank you.
Georgiana Francis, 15 Athens Street. I'm a current member of the Planning and Zoning Board. Just in response to the events, I don't know if everyone went to the Hippie Fest at the Sponge Docks this year, but you couldn't breathe, basically. So there's no problem with putting events on at the Sponge Docks. People will always come to the Sponge Docks. Now, I will say that part of the problem that we're facing here tonight is on the fault of the Sponge Docks business and property owners, because we do not have an association, and we used to. And that is a responsibility of us, and I hope that this meeting has shown all the property owners and business owners that we do need a Sponge Docks association, because stuff like this is going to keep happening to us. The downtown has a downtown district. They are approached with things, they are organized, it's a nonprofit, and we need to get our act together so that we don't come at, that this isn't so difficult to do. And we understand that everyone is trying to help us, but the problem with the Sponge Docks will always, the reason it's been maintained the way it has is because it is going, all the property is going through generations. And if it continues to do that, we will be fine. But if it stops, then that's when we have to worry about development. We don't have to worry. My father, who spoke earlier, doesn't have to worry that I'm gonna do something crazy, that so-and-so who doesn't even live in my city is gonna have a problem with, because I know what brings people to the Sponge Docks. I have no plans on changing that. Everybody was scared when the Sponge Exchange sold, okay? But he didn't change anything significantly. We were worried about it, right? But as long as we keep these things in our family, that will keep it. So that's why we have never had this problem. So the fear that something will happen, that you guys want protection, then make sure that you're teaching your kids the value of the property, that you're gonna leave them, and that they don't make those changes, because this property down there is too valuable to be sold. I'm not worried about mine being sold, and if anybody is worried about their property being sold, that is a problem that you have created by not instilling the importance of that property within your children and your family. So we need to take responsibility ourselves as well. And yes, we do need help in preservation and conservation. No one's saying that we cannot accept some help. But what we are saying is it is our decision, and it should only be our decision, and nobody's on the outside, because we know what works. We're the ones who suffer, we're the ones who pay. We have our blood, sweat, and tears in that property. And that is why you were seeing the emotion tonight. So I understand that it's not all your fault, it's on us too, but I'm saying that both sides are accountable. Okay, so I understand, Pat, we've talked about this, and so we have with Renee as well. I know you don't mean any harm, but you just have to understand where we're coming from. And at the same time, I want everyone to pay attention to what has happened tonight, and that we have also brought this on ourselves, and that we can do better and get organized to protect our property if we want them to listen to us. So next time a hotel or something else comes, if we have a new board who doesn't share that vision, we're gonna be in trouble. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. I believe in preservation. I think the Greektown should have a Greek cultural district. It's troubling that they voted it down in 2009, because it could have eliminated a lot of conflict that's going on tonight. And that's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about mapping, implementation, and conflict, not necessarily in that order. And for the record, I own multiple historic buildings in the National Register District, commercial, residential. I sat on the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation Board for 10 years. I was an officer for 6. I was president for 2. I hold the highest award given by the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation, the Carl Weinhardt Award. So I'm all for preservation. But what you've created are mapping conflicts and implementation conflicts. And a perfect example is of Mrs. Balearis' niece, where she said that the National Register District that has an enabling ordinance is very strict, and the sponge docks wouldn't want anything that strict, and that's fine. But when you have a mapping error and overlap, whose ordinance is going to affect the property that's in both districts, in the National Register District and the Greektown Overlay District? The house I live in was built in 1887. It's a contributing building in the National Register District. In the Greektown Overlay District, it's a non-contributing building. So do you see where and the city staff, for you people, it's going to be, you're creating a nightmare, because what ordinance is going to prevail, or what ordinance is going to be enforced on what property that is in both districts? Unless you make the ordinance that controls the Greektown Overlay District, the Greektown District, the exact ordinance as the National Register District, you have conflicts in the overlay areas. So, and I definitely agree with the speakers that said that this vote should be restricted to the property owners that are in the mapping area, so they can weigh in, just like it was in 2009. It was done with the property owners. So I'm all for it. I mean, I think when we started, at least I did, when they said they wanted to create a Greektown district, you know, when I was growing up, I've lived here 72 years. From Reed Street, Mrs. Arvanitis lived on the corner of Reed and Grand, and the Manusises lived on Reed, and other Greek people. It went from there to Dodecanese Boulevard. So I was thinking that. Now it's encroached up to the Golden Crescent. You have the condominiums that were built in the 80s as contributing buildings, but a house built in 1887 is not a contributing building. The Villa Plumosa apartments, they were built in the 80s, and where's I don't see the rhyme or reason. I mean, in some of the mapping, it looks like planners gone wild to me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thomas Wilkham, 69 West Park Street. My wife and I just moved here a year ago, fully time. And one of the reasons we moved here was for the Greek heritage. We came here 12 years ago, visited. My wife said, I'm going to buy a house here. I love this town. And since we've been here, we've seen, in the last 4 years that we've owned it, we've been here for a year permanently, we've seen some changes that does not support the Greek heritage. I understand what you guys want to do and you want to support the Greek heritage. I'm 100% for that. My only issue is you want to develop a new board. Who's going to be on that board? Are they going to be required to be residents in the area? What happens all of a sudden now, you get stuff that goes on where you get one board member that gets paid off, and now he's pushing these other guys, and we already have issues with our city with all the stuff that's going on, and now we might have another issue. So now if I make her mad, she's on the board because we have difference. Now I go to put in for something, and now she's like, well, screw Tom. We're going to push now and never let him do anything to his house. You know, I mean, it's not right. And do I believe we need something here? Yes. There's stuff happening right now down by our house. I mean, you know what's going on. You talked about that guy that wants to build a restaurant down there, right down the end of our road. His house is a commercial zone. He got an allotment to build a house down there, and now why is it not a resident zone? That whole area needs to be fixed. You know, your mapping is confusing as it is, and it's not even accurate, honestly. I mean, you guys are all people that build houses in commercial zones, and now you want this guy totally disown a National Historic building to put a restaurant there. There's no room for parking, you know, and stuff like that, and he's being allowed to do this. You know, it's just like, the board, when they go on there, they're like, oh, yep, it just went through, no problem. One guy, the mayor said, yep, we're good, and everybody agrees. We talked about it, and it's like we weren't even heard. It's like, this is not right. I mean, we got a square house now. I mean, my wife and I are driving down the road, and there was actually a group of visitors. They're all just staring at that house. And I'm like, really? And I mean, it looks like it's got a sniper rifle thing up in the top of the window. It's like, come on. And so we don't want that to happen, and we get it, and that's why I like kind of this idea, but we already have so many, and a lot of those ordinances aren't even being enforced. Are we gonna enforce these? Are you gonna enforce theirs? And these guys above them aren't gonna enforce? I mean, it's getting to be too much, and for me as a homeowner to wanna say, okay, I wanna do this to my house. Okay, now I have this place I go, I can go okay by these guys, I can go okay by these guys. And it's like, come on, I mean, we got 3 zones right around our house. I mean, who do we go to? Everybody? I mean, all I wanna do is paint my house, or all I wanna do is, do whatever. I want to put sod or rock in my yard. Now I got to go through 3 zoning people to figure out what I can do to my house. And then one says yes, 2 say no, or 2 say yes, and 1 say no. No, I can't do it. I mean, it's just not right. So do I want to preserve it? 100% yes. We love Greektown. Wait across our street, we go visit them all the time. They're Greek, they've been here forever. I think they were here when they first came over in the ship, but anyways.
I could ask you to wrap up your comments.
Yeah, so like I said, it's just, I get what you guys want to do, but it was kind of a mess in the very beginning. Maybe as we go on, you guys will get a little more organized. I get it, and I hope it happens, and I just hope it doesn't backfire. That's all I say.
Thank you.
Good evening, Athena Tsardulias. I don't own property in the Greektown area, but my heritage is there, and I'm currently running a 41-year-old family business, Tarpon Sponge, Inc., in the Sponge Exchange. So I appreciate all the comments we've heard tonight. I just want to say I do support something. Something's got to be done, for sure. We have to preserve what brings people here from all over the world. And let's not forget the working waterfront. That's important too. So my question is, how many more of these sorts of sessions will you have for the public to weigh in? I realize this is just very preliminary, and I'm sorry I wasn't here in the very beginning.
That's okay. We will do as many as it takes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Do we have anybody else who'd like to comment?
Well, we want to thank you all for coming tonight. There's been a lot of great conversation, different views, and that was the purpose of this. So I know that this was confusing for some, and we hope to make more clarity then the next time we do this. I want to reiterate what Allie had commented on. As there are the various overlays and items in place with the city, we will work on getting some type of a more easily digestible explanation onto Connect Tarpon, so folks can have time to read through and understand what's in place in the various areas within the city right now. And so continue to stay involved. Follow Connect Tarpon. I think you might give an update on a few next steps, or we will continue to monitor Connect Tarpon. Again, last thing I'll say is thank you all for coming. You'll see more about this, more notices on the next time that we do this, and opportunities to become engaged. This is a great project, and so thank you all for being here.
If anyone has packets or the paper surveys, just make sure to hand it in to us. And like I said, if you need more time, just drop it off at City Hall in the next week. If you bring your packets back to City Hall, just ask the security guard to call planning and zoning.
Okay.